Even men at the top of their game find themselves wanting more from life. Whether it's more meaning, unshakable confidence, a bigger impact, more money, deeper love, a hotter sex life, or a powerful legacy. Find out how good your life can be on this episode of Man Alive. Also, as I've supported men in their love and work lives for 15 years now, many men ask for the right words to say to be more successful, attractive, and desirable. But I found it's not so simple as giving scripts or lines because every man is different. So giving words or scripts would be like giving a tall, thin man a shorter, wider man's pants, or vice versa. The words have to make sense for you and your personality, and there's so much happening beneath the surface that people are responding to. If you're interested in how to become a better lover and leader in your own unique way, go to shanajamescoaching.com/quiz, or you can text ALIVE to 44144. It only takes a couple minutes and you'll start to get an idea of how you can be both more respected and desired. After you fill it out, we can schedule a time to review your quiz and talk about your specific challenges and desires. So again, go to either shanajamescoaching.com/quiz or text ALIVE to 44144. That's ALIVE to 44144. Enjoy this episode of Man Alive. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Man Alive. I'm your host, Shana James, and I'm excited to be here today with a dear friend and colleague, Michael Porcelli. Michael, welcome.
Hi.
We are going to talk about some of the parallels of what's happening in our culture right now around how many important themes that we've been avoiding for years, decades, centuries are actually coming to the surface right now. And it's painful in many ways and also relieving, to have some truth coming to the surface. And so today we want to talk about how this also parallels in our personal relationships. And many people I work with and many people I talk to and many people I just witness out in the world, I can see and hear the tendency to avoid challenging conversations. And I was just working with a client today, and this happens a lot, where people say like, well, if we don't talk about things, we kind of can deny that they are happening, right? Like if many parts of our lives are good, but there are certain struggles, if we just kind of sweep them under the rug, we don't have to feel bad about ourselves, or we don't have to prove that we're good enough or something like that. So I'm happy to get into this conversation with you, Michael, because, we've taught together and you've created some really beautiful content around authentic relating. And it's one of my favorite things in the world to do. So thank you for being here, and thank you for being someone who has inspired me in the realms of authentic relating and getting more crisp and clear and honest and connected in the conversations we have.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm glad to be here. I'm excited about the topics that we have to share, and maybe to connect the two parallels. Like whatever's going on in society, is really built out of relationships, right? In a way, what we call society, if you go back far enough in history, it arises from conversations just between people, and small groups of people, tribes, like in ancient times.
Right. Yeah. It's like the culture actually is larger groups of smaller groups.
Exactly.
Of even partners and family units.
Exactly. Yeah.
Before we dive in, let me give you a bio introduction for those who don't know you.
Okay.
Michael is a consultant, coach, educator, writer, speaker, group facilitator, and founding member with Bedrock Culture and Leadership. His main areas of professional interest are centered on the dynamics between human beings, technology, and the social world. He's the leading expert in the practices of authentic relating and the circling method, and he's a former course leader with the Authentic Man program and director of training and faculty development with the Integral Center in Boulder, Colorado. And we met in 2008, so 12 or so years ago, at your Authentic Man program, where I was facilitating, one of the women facilitators. And it's been a ride ever since. But, I just go back to some of those first moments of us meeting. Mm-hmm. And like the beginning of our relationship was, all right, we're getting real, we're getting honest. And, it set a foundation that I think a lot of people don't have in their relationships.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, one of the first things that I learned from just my time with you when you were facilitating was, uh, I mean, I needed a lot of help back then, but just to be able to speak clearly what I was feeling and what I was wanting.
Mm.
Like I had this strange set of beliefs and even behavior patterns of like, somehow I should be able to get what I want and need in relationships without having to reveal it.
Uh-huh.
And that would be the right way or something. It was very weird for me to kind of actually kind of be like, oh, I got to say it.
I think that's really common though. Like we should somehow be able to get what we need and want without saying it. I mean, that is a very common theme. You know, when I work with men a lot, it's like when I say something like, well, did you ask? Or, you know, have you asked how she likes that or how she wants that or what she wants? Or, you know, or have you shared about what you want? And oftentimes the answers to those questions are no.
Yeah. Yeah. There's like a fantasy that it's just supposed to happen kind of magically or on its own. And that's a sign that it's meant to be or something
Yes.
like that.
Yes.
It's strange.
It's interesting. You know, for me these days, I'm like the fantasy's dead, and but there's something really beautiful that gets to be created, like real, true connection and intimacy when we're not relying on the fairy tale that we think is, you know, happily ever after, and that's all there is.
Right. Right. I mean, this leads me to just right into the very first thing I want to offer here is like, one of the core practices and capacities we have in authentic relating is setting context.
Yes.
And, context is always happening. It's just kind of the implicit things that maybe we're not saying, but there's also explicit context we can say. Like, for example, here we are, we're speaking English and we're recording a podcast together. Like that's happening. We didn't say it, but now we did, right?
Right.
So setting context is, in order to have more of what you want in relationship, that process of clarifying answers to questions like who and what and when, and how long and why and how, and that sort of thing. And anything from just like, what are we going to do for the next hour together
Yeah.
versus like a business contract or like a legal or a legislative thing at the societal level. All these things are versions of sitting down as two or more people and clarifying what we're going to do and what the agreement is around our relationship and our interaction. And it's really
Yes. I love context, and I work with it a lot with clients, especially around challenging conversations, because right, we often come to the table in different contexts, and if they're hidden or just unspoken, if they're implicit, we don't know what context, you know, the person sitting across from me is in. And so especially with challenging conversations, I find in relationships, if someone's going to say, hey, you know, I'm struggling with this, but if the context isn't set for either like how I would love for you to hear me right now, or why I'm having this conversation, or I'm saying this because I, you know, one of the whys could be I'm saying this because I want to actually be more connected to you, without making that explicit, the person listening could be like, oh, well, he's saying this because he's leaving, or she's saying this because, you know, she's not attracted to me anymore, she doesn't want me anymore, or because our business is falling apart and I'm pulling out, right? Like it's such a powerful piece.
Yep, totally. Like I recognized that one of my big learning moments was just recognizing how I had these communication habits of like, I would basically start talking kind of midway through my thinking, and I had to inform the person like, oh, wait a minute, I should back up a second and share where I'm coming from and why I'm saying the things, because otherwise the person's like, why are you saying this? What's going on? I'm not sure how to.
Right, and then they make it up, and they've got all these ideas from where they're coming from.
Yep, totally. So that's kind of the beginning. That kind of gets us started, and then over time, things are going to inevitably get out of sync in some way. There may be some, spelling out explicitly everything would be weird and boring anyway. It would be very sort of legalistic. So we naturally leave things out, and that's fine.
Though
Right?
it just leads me, as you're saying that, to think about like, oh, the different moments of context setting. Like and maybe this is where you're going, but there could be a context setting as a whole of, okay, how do we want to be in relationship together? Why are we doing this?
Yeah.
What's happening here? And then it sounds like what you're saying also is, in the moment, in a conversation, in a day, in a vacation, there are these smaller moments of context setting.
Yeah. You can revisit that. You can think about it as revisiting context in a way. Sometimes it'll feel like this need to clear something up, to clear the air, right? There's something that's between me and you. And sometimes these things can really accumulate over time.
Oh, yes.
Somebody did or said something, we made an interpretation of that, and we maybe took it personally, and then we didn't share that we made that interpretation or that we were taking it personally. Now I have this weird thing, and whenever I sort of think of this person, when I think of Shayna, it doesn't feel so good. And then you kind of feels like you're not really encountering the real person. Yeah. You're sort of encountering this accumulated set of unconfirmed
stories and images and undigested experiences. And
yes. Yeah, totally.
And that can happen with business partners, that can happen with romantic partners, that happens with family. It happens all the time.
Mm-hmm. Not only can it happen, I would just simply say Yeah, because we all arrive to any relationship with our personal history, and it's not like it's like a year zero moment when everything gets reset when we start our relationship.
That would be amazing if every year we could just reset.
I'm coming with all of my stuff from previous business partnership, previous intimate relationships, my upbringing, my relationships with my parents, and how those have imprinted me, and like that stuff is always going on in the background for each person involved. And the ways that we kind of get this accumulated stuff that we need to clear up usually comes from some way we haven't synced up or created what I call shared reality.
Reality.
Yeah. Key thing here, which is not just that we're experiencing the same thing together. It's that we're actually communicating in such a way that we're getting on the same page. So
even if we're on different pages,
exactly,
we communicate and understand, like, oh, you're on that page and I'm on this page.
Right. Yeah. It's like we're either coming to agreement or we're agreeing to disagree. Like we're actually finding the places where we're aligned, or we're making it explicit and mutually confirmed in a way, the ways that we're not aligned.
Right. Which is so different though than not being aligned and not having a shared context that we're not aligned. Right. Like if you and I are not aligned, but we're just kind of coming at each other without having this ability to step back and witness and say, hey, what I'm noticing here is that we're not aligned. Mm-hmm. There's a different way that we then get to move forward. Even though we're not aligned, there's a connection, or there's like you're saying, there's a shared reality that allows for more movement to happen, it seems like.
Yeah. So if we're going to do practical tips here, if we setting context is answering those who, what, where, when, why, how questions. Yeah. The shared reality, the clearing the air conversation. I think there's a couple of tips there. Like one is taking turns, right? I'm going to need to be revealing something maybe that was previously unspoken, that I'm holding on to, or maybe even hiding in some way.
Yeah.
Because I think I'm supposed to hide it in order for this to work, right? And this keeps not working. So, okay, now it's time to not hide it anymore, right? So that can feel vulnerable. And I recommend when you're revealing to practice owning your experience, which is to speak in a way that's inarguable. So even what you said there, I'm noticing we're not aligned. Are you noticing that you're not aligned? Or are you noticing that you have this idea?
Right. I'm noticing that I am not seeing us as aligned versus there is no necessarily like a truth that we are not aligned if I'm really speaking in a way that's inarguable.
Exactly. And that's the key tip there, is speaking inarguably, owning how you're feeling, owning what you're observing, owning what you're interpreting about what's going on, and sharing that with the person so they get to hear where you're coming from. Right. And oftentimes when you do this really well, the person is receiving probably new information, at least sort of clarified information, and they're able to kind of hear where you're at. And that
I'm just thinking of the difference. Like if I think about an example of this one, if you're not liking how someone has been acting, and the tendency would just be like, you're being a jerk or you're being an asshole or something,
Right.
right? Versus bringing it back. Okay, what's inarguable is something over here. As you said, that specific thing, instead of like just how you're generally being, right? The words
Mm-hmm.
that come out of your mouth or the facial expression that you made or something, like I started to feel, and then usually it's a lot more vulnerable, right? I started to feel deflated, or I started to feel unworthy, or something that happened over here,
Mm-hmm.
which makes it a lot easier for the other person to actually hear, right? Instead of you're being an asshole. Like, that's a
Yeah,
really different conversation.
exactly. If you start making assertions about them as though they were facts, like your opinions expressed as though they were facts about them, that evokes defensiveness. Now they have something to agree or disagree with you about. But
Right.
if you say it as your own experience, then there's less to disagree with. The person can just hear it as your point of view, grounded in your own experience.
It's so powerful. I just see that as a place where so many people, and couples especially, struggle, right? Because um, to defend or to say like, well, no, I wasn't being an asshole, or my tone wasn't sharp, or all of those things that we can argue with, and then it's like it just elevates, you, me, you, me, you, me, we're fighting, and we're both getting more and more tense, rather
Yes.
than actually dropping into a place where we could really connect with each other.
Yep. And the other piece that's essential is for it to happen the other way around. Sometimes it can be, we almost have this thing, especially like in corporate environments. I'm going to give you some feedback, which really just means you're going to sit there and listen.
Right.
I'm going to tell you what I think, and then we're done.
And then that's
right?
it. We're done.
You're supposed to accept my feedback or something, right?
Right.
But if you're really committed to shared reality, then there's actually two sides to every story. There's like the other person then has the opportunity to reveal their experience. And if they're doing it really well, they're also owning. And if you're listening really well, you're doing it empathically. You're checking for understanding. You're seeing if you can actually put your own perspective into theirs and understand what it might have been like from their point of view. From their
Yeah. I'm just thinking about a conversation I had with my kid the other day where there was a fight with my son's dad, and I was trying to get at like, well, what happened? And it was, or he was just like, well, dad was being mean. And I was like, okay, well, maybe that's true. And there are always two sides to every story. And I still haven't heard what happened before dad was being mean, or like, how did that conversation start? And, what happened over there? And I just notice, listening to children, right, that can often be like, it's a very, from a young age, we can have the sense of like, well, you did that. And not being able to see, oh, I had an impact. Like when I walk, especially men who are starting over in relationship, when I walk them through like what has not been satisfying for me, and then the next step of, for each of those, what role did I play in those?
Yeah.
There's a sense of, oh, now I can actually, it's a humbling process, but
Yeah.
now I actually have some power to see that what I do has an impact, and what I say and how I say it has an impact, which means I can change that for the future.
Yeah. I love there's two things you said there really important. Like owning and revealing can feel humbling when, as you're doing it, vulnerable. But the thing is, on the other side of that is power. You're actually reclaiming your role and what you did and the interpretations that you made. And you're no longer simply just at effect of what the other person did.
Yeah.
You might feel good if you get to play the victim and blame them in a short-term thing, but that's a kind of one of those fleeting pleasures. It actually is not good for relational health to just get to be right about something.
Yeah. There's that famous, is it landmark?
Going to be right
or whatever. You can either be right or you can be connected. Or yours is, you can be right or you can be happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. You could do that anyway. You could be right or you could be happy. You could be right or you could be connected. You could be right or you could be successful. It's like, it really fits for all of those.
Yep. And I like too that you brought in your son. Because oftentimes, I think developmentally, it is hard when you're very young to take the perspective of another person. That kind of
Right.
grow, your
Yeah.
mind matures. And then once we kind of become adults, we're pretty good at that, hopefully.
I'm
Most
making a
people
face, right? Like, we're not
are.
always so good at that.
No, but I think what happens is when some more basic level of ourselves or some more basic needs, like our need for safety or belonging,
Yeah.
feels threatened, we
Yes.
actually sort of age regress, and
Totally.
it gets very hard to now take other people's.
Someone else's perspective. Yes.
Yeah, and this is an important thing to kind of remember. Oh yeah, when I'm feeling triggered or upset, my capacity to see things from another person's point of view is going down.
Yeah.
Like that still happens to me. I mean, it doesn't matter how
Totally.
good I've become at these skills and practices and how much experience I've had.
Yeah.
I noticed the narrowing of my perspective back to my own sort of narcissistic point of view.
Yes. I've been studying positive intelligence lately, and Shirzad Sharmin, I think is how you say his last name. He has a piece in there where he talks about that another person's perspective or way is at least 10% right. So if we can actually just give even that little bit, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that then we can start to look at, okay, what might I like about that, or how could I, how can I have a conversation from a place of I have to appreciate, I don't have to, but it goes a lot better if I can appreciate something
Mm-hmm.
and then ask for something more, or then ask for something to be different, rather than just slamming down and saying, this is, I don't like this isn't going to work for me. Usually doesn't go very well.
Right, right. And if you make a demand and somebody gives into your demand, chances are it's probably not going to stick in a way that's right, feel good for the relationship.
Yep.
This kind of starts bringing us into this kind of last part, which is, once you start setting context, clarifying where you're both at, what you both want to have, these start looking like kind of agreements, sets of expectations of each other.
Yeah.
And then when you start clearing things up, like doing this kind of clearing the air, revealing, owning, and hearing the other person's side, you may wish to clarify or revise agreements that you've made.
Yes.
And the last component here is what I think of as I like it. I think of it as like restoring the integrity of the relationship.
Ooh, I love that.
And it's a foundation for it to remain strong and resilient. So when the going gets tough, strong relationships have installed not just clarity of these first two parts, context, shared reality, but also the ability to make things right when they go.
Repair, right? Because the reality is that no relationship is just going to stay, light and happy and perfect all the time. And so to not think of when we have conflict as a problem, but how quickly or how well can we actually repair?
Totally. Yeah. It's gonna rupture in some form or another, sometimes dramatically and sometimes in small ways.
Yes.
And we all kind of, to the degree we have an impulse to apologize, or on the other hand, an impulse to maybe like seek justice or something, like somebody wronged us in some way. That's sort of the two sides of it, kind of indicating some repair may be necessary here.
Right.
Yeah. And so this is just kind of step into the actual process here. This is something that a mutual friend of ours created, named Mark Michael Lewis. That's called the DEAR process. I think he calls it the yes DEAR process, but I can't remember.
That's interesting. It could have different connotations.
I think yes just means you're just a yes to like the reality of what's happening. But the DEAR is an acronym, and it's a 4-part acronym, which is really, I think, of the authentic relating upgrade to an apology. Like, I think it's a better version of it.
Yeah.
If you do it well, it restores the integrity of the relationship.
Right.
Because it makes things right.
I'm just thinking my experience with this is that you can even feel grateful or happy that something happened based on this process and the way it clears things up.
Yep. So the starting point really is noticing the rupture of some kind. Now, this is taking responsibility for your side. So if I notice I had an agreement with you, but I broke the agreement, or let's say I have a commitment to myself, an
Yeah.
agreement with myself about how I want to show up in relationships, a value that I hold, but I violated it. I may not have made the agreement with you explicitly. In either case,
Okay.
you can begin with D for declare. That's
Yeah.
the first step.
Declaring, right? Like either I didn't live up to this commitment or this agreement, either a shared agreement that we had or something that I was committed to for myself with you.
That's right. And what's so great about this is it puts the onus on the person who did the violation to initiate it, which is a way of being proactive and taking responsibility. And if I wait essentially for you to ask me for an apology, even that is already kind of a little minor setback, right? Like,
yeah, though that's a little confusing because if you're asking for an apology, you're imagining that the other person has wronged you, but this is more around declaring that you have done something that you don't feel good about.
yes, totally.
So
Yeah,
then there's like, that's like a larger culture or relationship culture or context of, oh, we use this dear process and we're both looking out for how we may have treated each other in ways that aren't living up to our own values. Is that right?
Yep, totally. And the declare is not an apology right off the bat, because that can also sort of feel, oh, I'm so sorry, da, 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 da. And I'm like, wait, now I'm like self-flagellating, like beating myself up somehow so that it makes things better between us. And that can feel weird. I mean, what's it like when somebody does that with you? Like, I'm so sorry.
It's a little confusing, and I notice I just kind of freeze a little bit. I mean, sometimes it's nice to hear someone recognizing that they did something that didn't feel good, but right, if they start going into a shame spiral, whereas the thing happened to me, then I'm like, where'd you go? Come back. I remember actually having that with a partner years ago who he just started, as soon as I said the thing that had hurt me, he started beating himself up and going down into the spiral. And then I was like, I actually ended up hitting him. I like whacked him on the arm and I was like, come back. Like, now you're just gone. Now you just left me in the middle of me telling you something vulnerable.
Yes. Sometimes the kind of really the too soon apology or the self-flagellation or the shame spiral can bring the attention back to it's narcissistic.
Right.
Back to me is that I'm here trying to make things right with you, but now I'm like putting the attention back on me.
Right. And I used to do this. I think I can see in my marriage where I would bring the attention back to me. So we're all guilty of it, right? We all do it in many different ways.
Yeah. And it's not like you don't get to apologize in this, but it just comes later. So let's keep going.
So we're declare. Yeah.
This is the agreement. I broke the agreement. Boom. I said I was going to be on time and I'm late.
Yeah.
Period. That kind of thing. Right. I said I wouldn't raise my voice at you. I just raised my voice.
I did. Yeah. Great example.
Yep. Explore is the E. So exploring any impact from breaking the agreement. This is where I basically put my attention on you, about how you feel that I broke the agreement, what the experience was like, what ideas are
I have, or what happened over here.
Yep. And that can be really powerful, like right off the bat, because the person feels like, oh, you're prioritizing their thing. But sometimes people can be like, oh yeah, no worries, there's no problem, right? Like they're trying to brush under the rug. And sometimes that's just coming from past experiences where like, oh, usually if this will make it go even worse, right? I'm going to not send you into a shame spiral. So I'm not going to, no.
Right. I'll just gloss this over.
But if you're doing it well, it's like, no, I really do care. Even if it's small, I want to hear how it was. Even if it's not that big of a deal from your point of view, I would still like to know the information.
Right. Like even if it's, yeah, there was a little bit of disappointment for me there, or I did feel annoyed that you were late and, I had to, that was precious time that felt wasted or something, right? It could just be anything, even if it doesn't feel like a huge deal.
Right. And it provides information. You might have some ideas about how this person might have been impacted, but you might be actually surprised to hear, oh, that's not what I thought would have happened. Yeah, it's a little bit different, which leads you it paves the way for the next step, which is amends. Now, amends, people who are in recovery programs kind of get this thing. This is when the making it right part happens. Yeah. And sometimes It might take time for the amends to complete, like, so you kind of maybe set up a new agreement to do that. But sometimes it could be very simple, right? What do you need for me to make this right?
Right. And I might say, I need you to actually be on time when you say you're going to be on time. Or
Hmm.
sometimes I like the fun ones too. Like, what do you need or what do you want? Like, I remember someone at one point, I don't know, it's like, well, I'll buy coffee for our next meeting because I was late for the last one.
Hmm. Yeah, you can get creative here. Sometimes this is where somebody wants an apology.
Mm-hmm.
Please apologize. Sometimes this is where somebody wants an explanation, which, let me just take this back to the D real quick. An error with the declare
Yeah.
can be to say, like, so here I am declaring, so I woke up and then this happened and then coffee and then I was late and then I got whatever.
The explanation.
No.
Yeah.
Declaring is not the explanation.
Right.
But sometimes you might be like, just tell me how that ended up happening.
Tell me what happened. Tell me how that happened. Yeah.
Yeah. In which case, cool. Now you can explain.
Yeah.
I've been in both cases where somebody is like, I don't want
to know.
It's like, oh, you don't? Okay. So this is focusing on them and how they've been wronged and how you need to fix it.
Need. Yeah.
If they don't want the explanation, then yeah, maybe you don't get to give it.
Right.
But whatever it is, it's more than just a gesture, but it can be a gesture. It's an energy. It's a reinvestment to make it. Sometimes the simplest amends is like, well, please apologize, explain to me why that happened, and then please recommit to the agreement, right?
Which leads to part 4.
And then sometimes there's a little extra stuff that goes on in the amends part. Yeah. But the other key here, and I want to put it on the role of the aggrieved party, like, I think sometimes we get in this mode of like payback or retribution. Yes. And amends can be like this, oh, cool, now I can make this other person suffer. Yeah. But that actually further damages the relationship. So being on the receiving side of a deer is a really good idea to think like, no, what would actually make this feel good again?
Right.
Restore the trust so that now I feel the trust again. Right.
Rather than like continuing some kind of battle that breaks down the foundation of a relationship.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. And then recommitting, or the R can also mean renegotiating.
Yes.
Sometimes the agreement was either vaguely defined or maybe
just didn't work for me, right? Like, I've thought about that a lot with making agreements that seem in integrity for one partner. And then once they actually try to live it, they realize, oh, that's actually not in integrity for me. I want it to be because I know it would feel good to you. Yes. But it actually may not be for me.
Right. Totally. I mean, this is where there's some amount of a gap often between our idealized selves and who we actually are, like the full whole version of ourselves. And often we don't live up to our idealized self in some ways. And especially when it comes to relationships, intimate relationships, especially, like I kind of have this ideal, like I'm this catch, or I'm like a great guy, or I'm nice, or I'm a guy with integrity. And but the truth is, like, some kinds of agreements, I'm just not very well equipped, at least in my current state, to make. So I should actually know my limitations. And this is where the whole system kind of comes together. Right? Renegotiating and recommitting is, in a sense, revisiting the context
exactly in the agreements, right?
Yes. And then it becomes like this cycle. And if you do it well, it's like the two of you are learning about what makes this relationship work. And so you're able to upgrade. It's a bit like a code update to your software or something.
Totally. I love that.
Make a new version that will be more functional based on the actual experienced reality between.
Yeah. What fascinates me as you say that is how I believe most couples I've met don't have this, like don't have agreements in the first place or set a context in the first place. And then don't also clear the air and
Mm-hmm.
don't, recommit or renegotiate. I mean, it's just so fascinating to me how we are not taught these skills.
Totally. Yeah. And if it sort of goes in the direction you're saying, like this kind of, we shouldn't have to work too hard at it, or the way that we imagine that it, the fantasy is the way that it's supposed to be. It's like we end up actually in these weird versions of the relationship where like my version of our relationship that's in my mind and your version of our relationship that's in your mind are like
very different.
Super different.
Yes.
Yeah. And sometimes a sign that has happened can be these weird like breakup moments. If you're talking about an intimate relationship where suddenly we're breaking up, and then it's just like, and then, all right, I got nothing to lose. So here's what I really think.
Here's what I haven't said.
Right. Which is weird, because then it's like, oh my gosh, like I had no idea. Like, how could we be so out of date?
Yes. And yet I'm totally guilty of that, after my divorce, I basically said, like, I'm not going to be in a long-term committed partnership with someone until I can actually stay true to myself and say what I need to say when I get disappointed or when I get upset. I've been more on the codependent end of, some people talk about I spacers versus we spacers. Like I spacers are much more, able to just be themselves no matter what, and we spacers kind of lose themselves in the space of a relational dynamic. And so I'm guilty of having all those things come out at the last moment, and I've seen the painful impact it has on a relationship. And yet you could look at a partner and be like, well, how could you not say these things? Right. And then we all have our ways of, okay, I'm trying to keep the peace, I'm trying to keep this together, I'm trying to keep this going.
Right.
And the very thing that I'm trying to keep going is falling apart because of that habit.
Yeah, totally. And it becomes that's sort of the downward spiral. Like, even if it doesn't get to the point where it's like, hey, we're breaking up and now we're telling each other the real thing. Like, sometimes people become avoidant of conflict because they go, well, whenever we do that, then there's like, well, this is because this other thing which happened then, and then and then it goes back, and you're like, wait a minute, there's like all these little links in this. It's like we were sweeping things under the rug, but like it's still some weird tangled mess of things. When you start pulling the one that just happened, it actually starts bringing out all these other ones.
The others.
Right. And it's like, well, we didn't, okay. And so then it becomes this huge thing, and it's like, well, but then people go, they formed the wrong idea. That's why we shouldn't
do this.
And sweep it under the rug more. It's like, no. Actually, you should get better at, like, I think about it as it's like dismantling the grenades, right?
Yes.
You're actually, if we do it right, like the most recent ones soon, we sort of prevent our future selves from weaponizing past grievances.
Right, from stepping on the landmines that we set there.
Exactly. You disarm the landmines. Yeah. And what's cool about that is then the new conflicts become quicker and easier.
Yes,
because
we're not entrenched.
Yes. So the other metaphor here is like the relational hygiene, right? It's like you don't just brush your teeth one time.
Right, one time ever.
Yeah, you got to do it kind of regularly. And like this kind of revisiting, you can think about it in any of these terms. Like, do we want to upgrade our context? Did somebody violate an agreement? Did I violate an agreement? Or just something seems off? I think we need to kind of clear the air here in some way.
And I love that. Even when you said violate an agreement, I can see, at a point in my history, maybe even now, where it's like, oh God, I'm bad, I'm wrong, I violated an agreement, versus the recognition of our humanity, right? Like, I will violate agreements, you will violate agreements, accepting that this is the way of being human as we're learning and growing. And how can we not, take ourselves into that shame spiral and actually be willing to look at, okay, where am I not living up to the values or the integrity I have for myself? Part of what I'm loving about this conversation is how excited we both are. It's like we're such relational geeks in a way, but I think part of it is because it's so powerful and we've seen the value of this.
Totally. And now I kind of want to go all the way back to where we started for like society level things. Like, one of the conversations that's been happening is sort of like, do we like this criminal justice system that we use? And this, what's going on with all this mass incarceration? And you kind of think of the prosecutor and the defense, it's sort of this adversarial thing. It's like somebody was harmed, but you got to like try to get out of it. So you can't like confess, because otherwise they're going to use that against you and they're going to throw you in jail or something. This weird dialogue dynamic is very different than the one we're talking about here. And there's actually a whole set of practices called restorative practices. One variation is called restorative justice. This kind of came, the modern version of it came in the 70s, although there's a lot of attribution to this to sort of more indigenous ways of making peace. You don't have prisons to throw people away, and you have to actually restore
them into the society.
Yeah, because you need that person around, right? So you want to feel good about having that person around still. And that idea of like restorative practices in this writ large way of like, how could we potentially deal with criminal infractions in a healthier way is basically a more formal version of this DEAR process. A more kind of extensive, or people kind of convene these restorative circles and these kinds of ideas. And some places, like in New Zealand, all juvenile offenses are piped through restorative practices. And there's actually certain jurisdictions in the United States that have agreements with the district attorneys for juvenile infractions to go through the restorative process instead of the kind of adversarial process. Yeah, and then the punishments become, like we were talking about with the amends, they become retributive, right? It becomes like, we're going to make this person pay. But oftentimes, some people think they're going to get some satisfaction, like, oh, I'll see the person who murdered my child get executed, and that'll make me feel better. But then they don't feel better.
No.
Or sometimes, the victim themselves sort of feels like, here's what I want, right? What would be focused on my needs would be for me to hear like, hey, person, explain to me what happened and apologize to me for doing it, and let me know what you're doing with your life so that this won't happen to other people like it happened to me.
Right.
The defense attorney is like, no, you can't do any of that, right? Or imagine this is your first time at a criminal trial and you're like, well, I feel bad and I want to make this right. And your attorney's like, no.
You can't say any of that.
You can't say any of that. You can't do it. And it's like, wait a minute. Like the very thing that would potentially make peace again,
yes,
that would have
not
these people
allowed to happen.
Not allowed to happen.
No.
But I think there's a better way of doing things, and maybe we're not going to sort of solve the criminal justice system right now, but this idea of starting small, starting with the people in your life.
As we start with the people in our lives, and then we reach, we branch out into then our colleagues or our school systems or our communities. And if we're more practiced in this, we can start to do it, and we can start to see it and forward it in our communities rather than supporting what's already there that tends to not work and that we're seeing. Right, the tragedies of these days.
Yeah,
we've been seeing them forever, but now they're actually really, coming into the light.
Yeah, and when you do it with your intimate partner, your co-parent, with your child, you exemplify it for your child when you're restoring with your partner. Like these things are setting an example. So hopefully, this kind of it doesn't even get to the point where crimes get committed, because people are used to being like, oh, like I can work things out. Like I can make things right on the playground or whatever with my classmate. I don't need to escalate to this kind of payback model or, tell on them or something. It's like, actually we can do it between us, and that's better.
I love it. Thank you so much for having this conversation. This definitely feels like, sticking a little spoon into a huge pot of soup or into the ocean in a way. But it does feel like a really beautiful and powerful foundation for people to bring into their relationships and start to look at, how do I want to create this relationship? What is it based in what are we doing here, rather than, oh, we're just, we're here because this is what people do. Or, it might be we're here to run a business, or we're here to create a family, but there are always more nuances and ways that I think we can feel re-inspired, right? And to reignite aliveness and awareness and connection. So thank you. And I guess I'm curious if there's anything you want to leave people with.
Yeah, a few things. I'll say, like, I hope there's some pragmatic, actionable things in this conversation for you, from setting context to kind of clearing the air and shared reality and owning your experience, to restoring integrity using the DEAR process. And my encouragement is to be proactive with all of these parts in the relationships that you currently have, and start small. Be proactive and start small.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here today, and thank you for being so committed to this in your own life and in the world.
You're welcome. Good talking with you, Shayna.
I'm so glad you joined us for today's episode of Man Alive. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and it gave you something to consider and explore in your life. If you like what you heard, I'd be so grateful for you to subscribe and write a quick review that helps men like you find us. And again, head over to shaynajamescoaching.com/quiz or text the word ALIVE, ALIVE, to 44144 to get a sense of how you can become a better lover and leader. You'll start to see how you can be both more respected and desired in your unique and genuine way. If you don't feel as confident or as excited about life or love as you'd like to be, this quiz is a really great starting point and will guide you toward a more passionate love life and a more inspiring and successful career. So again, text ALIVE, ALIVE, to 44144 or head over to shaynajamescoaching.com/quiz. Join us each week for a new episode of Man Alive.